It's a beautiful afternoon, and you're exactly where you want to be. Settled into a plush seat aboard one of Britain's finest express services. The countryside sliding past your window in long green ribbons. The dining car steward has just refilled your tea. Life for this particular moment is perfect. Then something odd happens. The steward moves quickly through the carriage, purposefully, quietly, and slides your window shut without a word. Before you can ask why, he's already moved on to the next passenger. Then the next. Windows closing down the full length of the coach, one after another, like someone buttoning up a coat before a storm. But the sky outside is clear. A low vibration builds beneath your feet. The track rhythm shifts, faster, somehow more urgent. The teacup trembles in its saucer. You grip the armrest without quite meaning to. Then the world outside turns white. Water detonates against the glass. A wall of it, violent, total, shockingly loud, hammers the windows and swallows the view completely. Behind you, a woman cries out. A gentleman lurches sideways. Someone's newspaper is suddenly just pulp. The carriage fills with gasps and nervous laughter, and the sharp smell of cold water on warm glass. And then it's over. 10 seconds, perhaps less. The countryside returns. The train accelerates. The steward reappears, utterly calm, with a fresh pot of tea and a small, knowing smile. Nobody explains anything. Nobody needs to. Because this wasn't a burst pipe and it wasn't a storm. The train didn't slow for a single second. This was the railway doing exactly what it was designed to do. And to understand why water just exploded past your window at 60 miles per hour, we need to go back to steam's most inconvenient truth. Steam locomotives were magnificent, and everyone knew it. They were the fastest, most powerful machines the Victorian world had ever produced. Thundering monuments to iron, fire, and human ambition. But underneath all that magnificence sat a problem so fundamental, so stubbornly inconvenient, that no amount of engineering pride could make it disappear. They were absolutely desperate for water. A single express locomotive on a long mainline run consumed anywhere between 2,000 and 6,000 gallons. Every mile the boiler was drinking. Every mile the tender, that water-carrying carriage hitched directly behind the engine, was running lower. On a route like London to Edinburgh, nearly 400 miles of track, that meant stopping. Not once. Multiple times. Each stop consuming 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes, while crews scrambled to connect hoses and replenish tanks. For passengers, it was an irritation. For railway companies, it was a catastrophe in slow motion. This was the 1850s, and Britain's great rail companies were locked in a war of speed and prestige. The Midland Railway, the Great Northern, the London and North Western. Each was chasing records, courting wealthy passengers, and printing timetables that were really just public declarations of superiority. Every minute saved was a weapon. Every unnecessary stop was a humiliation. Directors sat in mahogany offices, studying timetables with the intensity of generals studying battle maps. The question wasn't whether water stops were a problem. Everyone agreed they were. The question, the one that kept engineers awake, was whether anything could actually be done about it. The tender could only carry so much. The locomotive demanded so much more. And somewhere between those two brutal facts, hundreds of thousands of journey hours were being lost every single year. Someone had to solve this. The question was, how? In 1860, a quiet engineer named John Ramsbottom had an idea that sounds almost too simple to be true. What if the train didn't stop for water? What if the water came to the train? Ramsbottom was the locomotive superintendent of the London and North Western Railway. A serious, careful man who solved problems with a pencil before he ever touched a wrench. His solution wasn't complicated. It was just clever. And clever done right is often better than complicated. Here's what he built. Between the rails, in a long straight section of track, his crews laid a cast iron trough, just under half a mile long, filled with water, sitting flush with the ground, tucked neatly between the sleepers. From the platform of a passing station, you'd barely notice it was there. Beneath the tender of the locomotive, Ramsbottom fitted a hinged metal scoop. When the train approached the trough at full speed, the fireman reached for a handle and lowered the scoop down into the water. The speed of the train, 60 miles per hour or more, forced water upward through the scoop and straight into the tender tank. In 30 seconds, the train could collect up to 2,000 gallons. Then the scoop came up, the trough disappeared behind them, and the train ran on without losing a single mile per hour. Think of it like dragging a spoon through a puddle at a full run. The water has nowhere to go but up. The first trough was laid at Mockdry in North Wales, and it worked exactly as Ramsbottom had sketched it. No drama, no ceremony, just a problem elegantly removed. But elegant ideas and messy reality are very different things, because putting water, iron, fire, and human hands together at speed was never going to stay tidy for long. The theory was perfect. The practice was absolutely, spectacularly not. The most common disaster was the simplest. A fireman, busy with the boiler, distracted for just a moment too long, forgot to raise the scoop after the trough. The tender tank filled, and kept filling, until water came screaming out of the overflow vents in a white, furious torrent. It drenched the footplate crew instantly. It surged back along the train. Passengers in the leading coaches had approximately 2 seconds of warning before the windows turned completely white, and an ice-cold wall of water found every gap, every crack, every slightly open window in the carriage. A ruined hat was the lucky outcome. A soaked lap robe, a destroyed newspaper, a first-class passenger standing up with water dripping from his mustache. These were the minor casualties of a fireman's momentary lapse. Then there were the worst days. In one of the most dramatic recorded incidents, 2 express trains passed each other at speed directly over a water trough. One locomotive had its scoop deployed, actively pulling water. The other had an open coal tender alongside. The collision of forces, water under pressure, meeting the full rush of 2 trains passing at a combined speed of over 100 miles per hour, produced something closer to an explosion than a splash. Water punched sideways with enough force to scatter coal clean off the tender. Windows on both trains shattered. Crew members on both footplates were knocked sideways by the impact. Nobody was killed, but nobody was dry either. Railway photographers knew exactly which bridges overlooked the famous trough locations. They waited patiently, cameras ready, hoping for precisely this kind of magnificent, terrible miscalculation. For them, a tender overflow wasn't a disaster. It was a masterpiece. The passengers, predictably, disagreed. But despite the soakings, the shattered windows, and the ruined mustaches, water troughs worked, and what they made possible was nothing short of extraordinary. By the early 20th century, Britain had installed over 140 trough sets at 60 locations across the network. They threaded through the Great Main Lines like a hidden lifeline, invisible to most passengers, absolutely essential to every timetable. The London and North Western Railway, the Midland, the Great Northern, the East Coast Main Line, all of them stitched together by these long, quiet iron channels sitting flush between the rails, waiting in the dark. And on those rails, the locomotives ran free. The Flying Scotsman, the Coronation Scot, the Cheltenham Flyer. These weren't just trains, they were national statements, thundering proof that Britain led the world in speed, ambition, and engineering confidence. In 1928, the Flying Scotsman completed the first ever non-stop London to Edinburgh run, 392 miles without a single scheduled stop. Water troughs made that possible. Without them, the timetable was a fantasy. No other country came close to matching Britain's commitment to the system. France tried a handful. America experimented with a few installations in the Northeast. but nowhere else built at this scale, or depended on the technology so completely. Water troughs were, in every meaningful sense, a British invention that Britain alone fully believed in. At their peak, these installations were servicing some of the fastest scheduled trains on Earth. Locomotives hitting 90 miles per hour, scooping 2,000 gallons in 30 seconds, never breaking stride. It was the golden age, and everyone riding those trains knew it felt like something special. But nothing this good lasts forever. The diesels were coming. And when they arrived, they would make water troughs not just unnecessary, but invisible. The end came quickly, brutally quickly, in the way that progress usually does. Through the late 1950s and into the 1960s, British railways withdrew steam locomotives at a pace that shocked even the people doing it. Diesel engines needed no water troughs. Electric trains needed no water troughs. Overnight, 100 years of elegant, hard-won infrastructure became a problem to be cleared rather than a treasure to be kept. The troughs were drained, the ironwork was lifted, the ground was leveled, and the tracks moved on indifferent. By 1965, they were essentially gone, not decommissioned with ceremony or preserved with pride, just removed quietly. Like furniture, nobody wanted anymore. 140 installations, 60 locations, a century of engineering ingenuity dissolved back into the landscape in less than a decade. Today, if you walk the old mainline routes with enough patience and enough knowledge, you can sometimes still find them. A faint, rectangular depression in the ground beside the track. A slight discoloration in the soil where the iron sat for generations. Ghost outlines of something that once kept the golden age moving. Most walkers pass them without a second glance. But now you know what you're looking at, and perhaps that changes the afternoon carriage scene entirely. Picture it again. The windows sliding shut, the vibration building beneath your feet, the teacup trembling in its saucer, the wall of white water detonating against the glass, the woman's cry, the steward's calm smile, not a malfunction, not a storm. A fireman's hand on a lever, iron and water and speed working together in perfect, improbable harmony, a solution one quiet engineer. Sketched out in 1860, and Britain ran with for 100 years. This time, you don't grip the armrest. This time, you smile back. Would you have dared to sit in the front carriage? Let us know in the comments. And if you love stories like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe.